The silver-haired developer's voice carried across the quiet park as he held his phone on speaker. These ghetto neighborhoods are gold mines if you know how to play the game. We buy low, push the right people out, build high, and sell to trust fund babies. Approaching the bench where Marcus Jordan sat reviewing documents, Richard Whitman barely glanced at the well-dressed black man. We need coffee. Black for me, latte for my partner. And tell the board we've arrived. When Marcus stood and extended his hand, his voice remained pleasant, despite the thundering in his chest. Richard Whitman and Trevor Pierce, I presume. Marcus Jordan, Director of City Planning. The color drained from Richard's face as he realized his catastrophic error. He had no idea that the man he'd just ordered coffee from would soon systematically dismantle his entire empire. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Marcus Jordan arrived at Westside Park 30 minutes early, his polished Oxford shoes collecting morning dew as he crossed the grass to a bench overlooking the development site. The crisp autumn air carried the sounds of the neighborhood waking. Children's voices from the nearby elementary school, the rhythmic thump of a basketball against asphalt. He placed his leather portfolio on the bench and extracted a folder of documents, anchoring them against the light breeze. "Morning, Mr. Jordan," called Mrs. Rivera, power-walking along her usual route. "They're not really going to tear down the community center, are they?" Marcus offered a reassuring smile. "That's what today's meeting is about. Nothing's decided yet." "We're counting on you," she said, continuing her brisk pace. "My grandkids need somewhere safe after school." He nodded, returning to his papers with renewed focus. The proposed luxury development would replace not just the aging community center, but also 3 blocks of affordable housing units. The numbers were impressive on paper. $120 million investment, hundreds of construction jobs, increased tax revenue. But the human cost remained conspicuously absent from the proposal. Marcus checked his watch. The Whitman-Pierce representatives were due in 10 minutes. He straightened his tie, mentally rehearsing the key questions he needed answered before this project moved an inch further. The low rumble of a performance engine drew his attention to the street, where a gleaming black Bentley pulled to the curb. 2 men emerged, one tall and silver-haired, the other younger with the lean build of someone who paid dearly for personal training. Their tailored suits probably cost more than what many neighborhood residents earned in a month. The silver-haired man held his phone at arm's length, speaker activated. "Jim, I'm telling you, these ghetto neighborhoods are gold mines if you know how to play the game." His voice carried across the quiet park. "We buy low, push the right people out, build high, and sell to the trust fund babies who think they're urban pioneers." Marcus remained still, watching. "The city's practically giving us the land," the younger man added, laughing. "Some diversity initiative garbage. As long as we include a few affordable units we'll never actually build, we're in." "Just don't mention that part to the planning board," the first man replied. "These bleeding hearts act like we're destroying their precious community. Hell, we're doing them a favor gentrifying this dump." They approached the bench where Marcus sat, still absorbed in their conversation. 20% return minimum, the silver-haired man continued. "Once we clear out the existing tenants—" "Excuse me," the younger man interrupted, noticing Marcus. "We're here for the planning board meeting. Where's the director?" "Jordan something?" Marcus looked up calmly. "The meeting's scheduled for 9 o'clock. The silver-haired man checked his Rolex. "We're early then." "Good. Listen, we need coffee. Black for me, latte for my partner if they can manage it here." He gestured vaguely toward Marcus's portfolio. "And tell the board we've arrived. Whitman-Pierce Development." "Richard," the younger man hissed, eyes darting uncomfortably to Marcus's perfectly tailored suit. "What, Trevor? I'm just—" Richard paused, finally registering Marcus's appearance. A flash of uncertainty crossed his face, quickly masked by practiced confidence. Marcus carefully replaced his documents in his portfolio and stood, extending his hand. Richard Whitman and Trevor Pierce, I presume. Marcus Jordan, Director of City Planning. His voice remained level, almost pleasant. You're in exactly the right place. The board members are already gathering inside. The color drained from Richard's face as Trevor's eyes widened in horrified recognition. We didn't realize, Trevor stammered. Clearly. Marcus gestured toward the municipal building. Shall we? I find it's best to begin these discussions with everyone's true perspectives on the table. He walked ahead of them toward the building entrance, maintaining a deliberate pace that forced them to follow. Behind him, he heard Richard whisper harshly, "Fix this. Now." As they reached the doorway, Marcus paused. "Oh, and gentlemen, the coffee machine is just inside to your right. Help yourselves." Richard Whitman's mind raced as he and Trevor stood awkwardly by the coffee machine. 25 years in development had taught him how to recover from setbacks, but this was catastrophic. "We need damage control," he muttered, stirring his coffee with unnecessary vigor. "That was Jordan himself. Did you see how he looked at us?" Trevor's hands trembled slightly as he prepared his latte. Maybe he didn't hear everything we said. Don't be naive. He heard enough. Richard straightened his tie, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Follow my lead." We apologize once, briefly, then move straight to the presentation. The numbers will speak for themselves. This project means too much to let a little misunderstanding derail it. A little misunderstanding? Richard, we just— "Shut up and put your game face on," Richard snapped, plastering on his most charming smile as a woman in a sharp pantsuit approached. "Mr. Whitman, Mr. Pierce, I'm Sophia Chen, legal counsel for city planning. The board is ready for you." Her expression revealed nothing as she led them down a hallway lined with photographs of city development projects. Richard noted her rigid posture. "Beautiful building you have here," he offered, receiving only a curt nod in response. The boardroom doors opened to reveal a long mahogany table surrounded by 10 serious faces. Marcus Jordan sat at the head, reviewing documents with reading glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look up as they entered. Richard's practiced eye quickly assessed the room. The gray-haired woman to Jordan's right, her brow already furrowed in disapproval, would be trouble. The younger man, tapping notes on a tablet, might be persuadable. Always identify allies and obstacles, Richard reminded himself. "Gentlemen, please take your seats," Marcus finally said, removing his glasses and gesturing to 2 empty chairs directly across from him. As they settled, Richard launched into his recovery strategy. "Director Jordan, before we begin, I want to sincerely apologize for our misunderstanding outside. Absolutely no disrespect was intended." Trevor nodded vigorously beside him. "None whatsoever. We deeply value this opportunity to work with your community." Marcus regarded them silently for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate your concern. However, we have a full agenda today, so perhaps we should focus on your proposal." The gray-haired woman cleared her throat. "For the record, I'm Councilwoman Diana Jefferson, representing the district where you plan to build." Her emphasis on plan carried unmistakable skepticism. "A pleasure, Councilwoman," Richard smiled warmly. "We've heard wonderful things about your advocacy." She didn't return the smile. "I'm sure." Marcus gestured toward the projection screen. "Your proposal, gentlemen." Trevor fumbled with his laptop connection, while Richard distributed folders to each board member. Years of experience took over as he launched into their well-rehearsed presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're proposing is nothing less than a renaissance for the West Side community," Richard began, his voice finding its confident rhythm. Whitman Pierce envisions transforming an underutilized area into a vibrant mixed-use development that will become the crown jewel of the city's revitalization efforts. As Trevor advanced through sleek architectural renderings, Richard noticed Marcus watching not the screen, but the reactions of his fellow board members. Our $120 million investment will create 300 construction jobs and ultimately 150 permanent positions, Richard continued. Property values in surrounding areas will increase by an estimated 25% within 5 years, substantially expanding the city's tax base. Councilwoman Jefferson leaned forward. And what happens to the current residents? Richard had anticipated this question. An excellent point, Councilwoman. We've developed a comprehensive transition program for qualifying current residents. He emphasized qualifying just enough. Additionally, 10% of units will be designated affordable housing, exceeding city requirements. That's 40 units, Marcus noted, compared to the 200 affordable units currently on the site. Richard didn't miss a beat. Director Jordan, with all due respect, those existing structures are aging, energy inefficient, and increasingly costly to maintain. Our development replaces outdated housing with modern, sustainable living spaces while creating economic opportunity in an area that frankly needs revitalization. Modernization, Trevor added, clicking to a slide showing dilapidated buildings photographed from their worst angles, brings prosperity to everyone in the community ecosystem. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. And the community center? Ah, the community center, Richard nodded sympathetically. While the current facility has certainly served its purpose, our plan includes a multi-function space that can be used for community events. It's smaller, yes, but significantly more modern. With rental fees that will ensure proper maintenance, Trevor added, missing Richard's subtle headshake. Councilwoman Jefferson's pen scratched furiously against her notepad. So, you're replacing a free community resource with one that residents will have to pay to access? We prefer to think of it as creating sustainability, Richard replied smoothly. The old model of dependency doesn't serve anyone's long-term interests. Our approach elevates the entire area by attracting the kind of residents who can support local businesses and contribute to community growth. From the corner of his eye, Richard caught Marcus and Sophia exchanging a glance. We're not just building housing, Richard continued, warming to his subject. We're curating a lifestyle that will transform the city's image. The time has come to embrace progress, rather than clinging to outdated social models. As the presentation concluded, silence filled the boardroom. Richard had delivered hundreds of pitches over his career, and he could usually read a room. This one felt frigid despite his best efforts. Thank you for your illuminating presentation, Marcus finally said, closing his folder. The board will review your proposal in detail. We'll be in touch regarding next steps. Richard recognized a dismissal when he heard one. Director Jordan, we're excited to work with you to make this vision a reality. If there are any concerns about our approach, we're always open to constructive dialogue. Marcus stood, signaling the end of the meeting. We'll be very thorough in our review process, Mr. Whitman. Very thorough indeed. The boardroom emptied quickly, leaving Marcus and Sophia alone with the lingering tension from the presentation. Marcus remained seated, his fingers forming a steeple as he stared at the development rendering still displayed on the screen. Well, Sophia said, collecting scattered papers, that was illuminating. I particularly enjoyed their curated lifestyle vision that just happens to exclude the people who currently live there. Marcus finally looked up. What are my options, Sophia? She settled into the chair beside him. Legally, we have to be careful. If we reject them outright after what happened this morning, they could claim discrimination or retaliation. I'm not interested in rejection, yet, Marcus replied. I want this by the book. Every requirement, every study, Every form filed in triplicate if necessary. The Peterson infrastructure requirements would apply, Sophia suggested, flipping through her legal pad. Updated environmental studies, traffic impact analysis, shadow studies for the high-rise elements. Historical significance reviews, Marcus added. That area has several buildings from the 1920s migration period. Community impact assessments, Sophia continued, warming to the task. And their affordable housing calculations don't account for the latest council resolution on unit sizes. Marcus nodded, his expression hardening. I heard what they think of the neighborhood, Sophia. What they think of people like me. But this isn't personal. He tapped the proposal folder. This is predatory development masked as progress, and they underestimated who they're dealing with. Marcus, Sophia said gently, it's okay if it's a little personal too. He allowed himself a slight smile. Schedule a comprehensive review committee for next week. I want eyes on every aspect of this proposal. Sophia stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, the way you handled yourself after what they said? That's why we all respect you. After she departed, Marcus moved to the window overlooking the city he'd spent his career shaping. Somewhere out there, Richard Whitman and Trevor Pierce were likely plotting their next move, unaware of the methodical response that was about to unfold. Across town in the gleaming Whitman-Pierce headquarters, Richard poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon despite the early hour. The corner office offered panoramic views of the city skyline, a testament to his previous successes. He took a long sip as Trevor paced nervously. Will you sit down? You're making me dizzy, Richard growled. I can't believe this, Trevor said, finally dropping into a chair. Of all the people to insult. It's handled, Richard interrupted. We apologized, we presented our case, and now we move forward. One black bureaucrat isn't going to derail a $120 million development. Trevor winced. Could you not phrase it exactly like that? Oh, for God's sake. Richard rolled his eyes. There's nobody here but us. Stop acting like we committed some cardinal sin. So we didn't recognize him and said a few things. He knows how the game is played. Did you see how the board looked at us? Especially that councilwoman? Jefferson? She was always going to be a problem. Her entire political identity is being the voice of the community or whatever. Richard made air quotes with his fingers. But the economics will win the day. That neighborhood is prime real estate being wasted on people who don't contribute to the tax base. Trevor loosened his tie. Still, we should probably adjust our approach. Maybe increase the affordable housing percentage? And cut into our margins? Absolutely not. Richard refilled his glass. We'll present the same plan to our investors next week. They're expecting 20% returns, and I won't disappoint them because some bureaucrats got their feelings hurt. What if Jordan makes trouble? Richard laughed dismissively. What's he going to do? Deny a massive investment in a district that desperately needs development? He'd have to justify that to the mayor, who, need I remind you, received significant campaign contributions from 2 of our major investors. Trevor seemed unconvinced. I don't know, Richard. Something about the way he looked at me. This isn't my first rodeo with difficult planning boards, Richard said, returning to his desk. He'll make noise, request some modifications, we'll throw in a basketball court or something, and everyone saves face. Trust me, in 6 months, we'll be breaking ground. Marcus's office was considerably smaller than Richard's, furnished with practical, sturdy pieces rather than status symbols. The walls displayed his urban planning degree alongside photographs of successful community-centered developments, projects that revitalized neighborhoods without displacing their residents. Impressive turnaround time, Marcus said, as Sophia entered with a thick stack of documents. The team was motivated, she replied with a knowing smile. Apparently, word spread about our morning visitors. Marcus took the paperwork. The standard development review package? With every applicable addendum, Sophia confirmed. Environmental impact studies from 3 different angles: historical preservation reviews, traffic pattern analyses, infrastructure capacity assessments, community economic impact projections, affordable housing requirement updates. Perfect. Marcus nodded, reviewing the cover letter. All standard procedure for a project of this magnitude. Absolutely by the book, Sophia agreed. I've highlighted the sections that typically require the most detailed responses. Marcus signed the cover letter requesting the additional documentation. And the timeline? 30 days for initial submission of supplementary materials, Sophia said. After review, we'll likely need clarifications, which could take another 30 days. Then, the public comment period, followed by committee reviews, Marcus added, each with their own documentation requirements. Sophia couldn't suppress a smile. It's almost as if our regulatory process was designed to ensure developers fully consider the impact of their projects on existing communities. Imagine that, Marcus replied dryly, handing her the signed paperwork. Please ensure this is delivered to Whitman Pierce today, with the full documentation checklist. After Sophia left, Marcus opened his calendar, mentally calculating how long the process could legitimately take if every procedure was followed to the letter. He wasn't seeking revenge. That would be unprofessional and ultimately unproductive. What he wanted was thoroughness. Complete, exhaustive, meticulous thoroughness that would force Whitman and Pierce to reveal their true plans and their true nature. His desk phone buzzed. Director Jordan. There's a James Wilson from Meridian Investment Group asking about the West Side development timeline. Marcus made a note of the name. Meridian, their primary financier. Tell him we've just initiated the standard review process and would be happy to keep all stakeholders informed of progress. He leaned back in his chair, considering the months ahead. Richard Whitman had no idea what was coming. The boardroom emptied quickly, leaving Marcus and Sophia alone with the lingering tension from the presentation. Marcus remained seated, his fingers forming a steeple as he stared at the development renderings still displayed on the screen. Well, Sophia said, collecting scattered papers, that was illuminating. I particularly enjoyed their curated lifestyle vision that just happens to exclude the people who currently live there. Marcus finally looked up. What are my options, Sophia? She settled into the chair beside him. Legally? We have to be careful. If we reject them outright after what happened this morning, they could claim discrimination or retaliation. I'm not interested in rejection. Yet, Marcus replied. I want this by the book. Every requirement, every study, every form filed in triplicate if necessary. The Peterson infrastructure requirements would apply, Sophia suggested, flipping through her legal pad. Updated environmental studies, traffic impact analysis, shadow studies for the high-rise elements. Historical significance reviews, Marcus added. That area has several buildings from the 1920s migration period. Community impact assessments, Sophia continued, warming to the task. And their affordable housing calculations don't account for the latest council resolution on unit sizes. Marcus nodded, his expression hardening. I heard what they think of the neighborhood, Sophia. What they think of people like me. But this isn't personal. He tapped the proposal folder. This is predatory development masked as progress, and they underestimated who they're dealing with. Marcus, Sophia said gently, it's okay if it's a little personal, too. He allowed himself a slight smile. Schedule a comprehensive review committee for next week. I want eyes on every aspect of this proposal. Sophia stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, the way you handled yourself after what they said? That's why we all respect you. After she departed, Marcus moved to the window overlooking the city he'd spent his career shaping. Somewhere out there, Richard Whitman and Trevor Pierce were likely plotting their next move. unaware of the methodical response that was about to unfold. Chutuk. Across town, in the gleaming Whitman Pierce headquarters, Richard poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon despite the early hour. The corner office offered panoramic views of the city skyline, a testament to his previous successes. He took a long sip as Trevor paced nervously. "Will you sit down? You're making me dizzy," Richard growled. "I can't believe this," Trevor said, finally dropping into a chair. "Of all the people to insult." "It's handled," Richard interrupted. "We apologized, we presented our case, and now we move forward. One black bureaucrat isn't going to derail a $120 million development." Trevor winced. "Could you not phrase it exactly like that?" "Oh, for God's sake!" Richard rolled his eyes. "There's nobody here but us. Stop acting like we committed some cardinal sin. So we didn't recognize him and said a few things. He knows how the game is played. Did you see how the board looked at us? Especially that councilwoman? Jefferson? She was always going to be a problem. Her entire political identity is being the voice of the community, or whatever." Richard made air quotes with his fingers. "But the economics will win the day. That neighborhood is prime real estate being wasted on people who don't contribute to the tax base." Trevor loosened his tie. "Still, we should probably adjust our approach. Maybe increase the affordable housing percentage? And cut into our margins? Absolutely not." Richard refilled his glass. "We'll present the same plan to our investors next week. They're expecting 20% returns, and I won't disappoint them because some bureaucrats got their feelings hurt. What if Jordan makes trouble?" Richard laughed dismissively. "What's he going to do? Deny a massive investment in a district that desperately needs development? He'd have to justify that to the mayor, who, need I remind you, received significant campaign contributions from 2 of our major investors." Trevor seemed unconvinced. "I don't know, Richard. Something about the way he looked at me." "This isn't my first rodeo with difficult planning boards," Richard said, returning to his desk. "He'll make noise, request some modifications, we'll throw in a basketball court or something, and everyone saves face. Trust me, in 6 months, we'll be breaking ground." Marcus's office was considerably smaller than Richard's, furnished with practical, sturdy pieces rather than status symbols. The walls displayed his urban planning degree alongside photographs of successful community-centered developments, projects that revitalized neighborhoods without displacing their residents. "Impressive turnaround time," Marcus said, as Sophia entered with a thick stack of documents. "The team was motivated," she replied with a knowing smile. "Apparently, word spread about our morning visitors." Marcus took the paperwork. "The standard development review package?" "With every applicable addendum," Sophia confirmed. "Environmental impact studies from 3 different angles. Historical preservation reviews, traffic pattern analyses, infrastructure capacity assessments, community economic impact projections, affordable housing requirement updates." "Perfect," Marcus nodded, reviewing the cover letter. "All standard procedure for a project of this magnitude." "Absolutely by the book," Sophia agreed. "I've highlighted the sections that typically require the most detailed responses." Marcus signed the cover letter requesting the additional documentation. "And the timeline?" 30 days for initial submission of supplementary materials, Sophia said. "After review, we'll likely need clarifications, which could take another 30 days. Then, the public comment period, followed by committee reviews," Marcus added, "each with their own documentation requirements." Sophia couldn't suppress a smile. "It's almost as if our regulatory process was designed to ensure developers fully consider the impact of their projects on existing communities." "Imagine that," Marcus replied dryly, handing her the signed paperwork. "Please ensure this is delivered to Whitman Pierce today, with the full documentation checklist." After Sophia left, Marcus opened his calendar, mentally calculating how long the process could legitimately take if every procedure was followed to the letter. He wasn't seeking revenge. That would be unprofessional and ultimately unproductive. What he wanted was thoroughness. Complete, exhaustive, meticulous thoroughness that would force Whitman and Pierce to reveal their true plans and their true nature. His desk phone buzzed. "Director Jordan, there's a James Wilson from Meridian Investment Group asking about the West Side development timeline." Marcus made a note of the name. Meridian, their primary financier. "Tell him we've just initiated the standard review process and would be happy to keep all stakeholders informed of progress." He leaned back in his chair, considering the months ahead. Richard Whitman had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks into what Richard had dismissed as bureaucratic theatrics, Trevor stood in his office doorway looking ashen. "They're requesting what?" Richard demanded, glancing up from his computer. "A comprehensive archaeological assessment," Trevor replied, dropping another thick folder onto the already towering stack of paperwork. "Apparently, there might be historically significant artifacts in the eastern section of the development site." Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "That's absurd! It's a rundown community center, not an ancient burial ground. The request cites preliminary findings suggesting the area might contain remnants from the Great Migration Settlement period," Trevor explained, "which triggers Section 4.7 of the Historical Preservation Ordinance." "This is the third assessment this week," Richard fumed. "First, it was the shadow impact on the elementary school playground. Then the noise pollution projections. Now this archaeological nonsense." Trevor sank into a chair. "Our environmental consultants say the expanded studies will cost an additional $75,000, and the historical assessment team wants $40,000 just to start. And delay us another 2 months," Richard added bitterly. "Meanwhile, our carrying costs on the land option are bleeding us dry." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Whitman, James Wilson from Meridian Investments is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Richard's expression darkened. "Not now. He's called 3 times today," his assistant pressed. "Fine," Richard snapped, grabbing the phone. "James, I was just about to call you." His voice instantly transformed into smooth confidence. Trevor watched Richard's performance with grudging admiration. 20 years as Richard's partner had taught him how the man operated. Ruthless with subordinates, obsequious with investors. "Minor procedural hurdles," Richard was saying, leaning back in his chair. "Completely standard." "Yes, we anticipated some additional studies." "No, the timeline isn't significantly affected." Trevor knew this was a lie. Their projected groundbreaking had already been pushed back 4 months, and the budget for regulatory compliance had tripled. "Of course, I understand your concern about returns," Richard continued, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. "The investor presentation next month will address all of this." "Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it." Richard hung up, his false smile instantly vanishing. "The vultures are circling." "They have reason to worry," Trevor pointed out. "We promised breaking ground by fall." "It's that sanctimonious bastard Jordan," Richard snarled. "He's deliberately burying us in paperwork." "He's just following regulations," Trevor countered. "Very thoroughly." "Don't be naive," Richard shot back. "This is personal. But 2 can play that game. Call Councilman Davis. Remind him about our generous support during his campaign. We need pressure from above to move this along." Trevor hesitated. Involving political pressure might backfire. "Then what do you suggest?" Richard challenged. "Because right now, we're hemorrhaging money on a project that's going nowhere." Across town, Marcus reviewed the latest findings with growing concern. What had begun as procedural thoroughness had uncovered something far more troubling. "You're sure about these figures?" he asked, looking up at Sophia. She nodded grimly. Their financial disclosures don't align with the public records we obtained. The affordable housing units they've promised would cost them nearly $16 million to build, according to their own budget. Yet, they've only allocated $6 million. Because they never intended to build them, Marcus concluded. There's more, Sophia continued. The community benefit package they presented to us differs substantially from what they've told their investors. They've internally classified it as an optional development phase contingent on tax incentives. Marcus leaned back, processing this information. So they're promising us community benefits to secure approval while telling investors those benefits may never materialize. Exactly. And look at this. Sophia pointed to another document. Their investor prospectus projects 97% market rate occupancy within 2 years. That's mathematically impossible if they build the promised affordable units. Marcus felt a shift in his perspective. His initial motivation, ensuring the developers faced appropriate consequences for their arrogance and prejudice, suddenly seemed secondary to a much larger concern. This isn't just about their attitude that day, he said quietly. They're planning to systematically displace an entire community through deliberately broken promises. And technically, Sophia added, that crosses the line from unethical development to potential fraud. Marcus stood, moving to the window that overlooked the neighborhood in question. Children played basketball on a court beside the community center. Elderly residents sat on apartment stoops, watching the world go by. This was more than buildings. It was a living ecosystem of human connections developed over generations. Get me everything you can on Meridian Investment Group, he decided. Their involvement, their due diligence protocols, and find out who else is backing this project. Taking on their investors? Sophia raised her eyebrows. That's escalating things considerably. This isn't personal anymore, Sophia, Marcus replied, his resolve hardening. These developers aren't just disrespectful, they're predatory. And I won't let them exploit this community on my watch. Director Jordan, the deputy mayor is on line 1, Marcus's assistant announced, her tone conveying it wasn't the first such call this week. Marcus sighed, setting aside the community housing proposal he'd been reviewing. Put him through. Marcus! Deputy Mayor Harrison's artificially jovial voice boomed from the speakerphone. How's my favorite bureaucrat today? I'm well, Robert. What can I help you with? Marcus kept his tone professionally neutral, despite knowing exactly why Harrison was calling. I've been hearing some concerns about the West Side redevelopment. Whitman Pierce seems to think they're getting the runaround. The false conviviality in Harrison's voice thinned. The mayor's quite interested in seeing that project move forward. Significant investment, job creation, all the things we campaigned on. Marcus leaned forward. We're simply conducting our due diligence, Robert. Standard procedure for a project of this magnitude. Of course, Harrison replied. No one's suggesting otherwise. But perhaps we could streamline things? The developers mentioned some archaeological study that seems excessive. The historical preservation requirements apply to all developments in districts established before 1940, Marcus explained patiently. I can't selectively waive regulations based on a developer's timeline concerns. A pause, then Harrison's voice hardened. Marcus, let's be practical. The mayor wants a ribbon cutting before the election. Whitman Pierce has significant connections with campaign donors. Do I need to spell this out? No, you've been quite clear, Marcus replied. I'll ensure the review process remains thorough and fair, exactly as the law requires. Was there anything else? The line went silent for a moment. You're putting me in a difficult position, Marcus. I'm simply doing my job, Robert. Have a good day. Marcus ended the call, then pressed his intercom. Lisa, please ask Councilwoman Jefferson to join me for lunch today, if she's available. He needed allies, and Diana Jefferson had been fighting predatory development in her district for years. Across town, as Marcus strategized his next moves, Richard Whitman was facing pressures of his own. Richard paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Look, I don't care what you have to do. I need those bridge loans extended another 6 months." He listened, face reddening. "That's not acceptable. We have guarantees from 3 council members that this project will move forward." Trevor watched from the doorway, unsure whether to enter during what was clearly a tense conversation. "No, don't put me on hold, damn it!" Richard slammed the phone down, finally noticing Trevor. "What?" "Deputy Mayor Harrison called," Trevor said carefully. "Jordan isn't budging." Richard collapsed into his chair. "Perfect. Just perfect." Trevor hesitated before closing the office door. "Richard, I think it's time we discuss contingencies. If this project fails—" "It can't fail!" Richard exploded, slamming his fist down. "Everything is tied up in this development. Everything!" "What do you mean, everything?" Trevor asked, suddenly alarmed. Richard's shoulders sagged as the fight drained out of him. "I leveraged my personal assets to secure the land option. The Riverside project losses last year nearly bankrupted me. This development isn't just about the company. It's my financial lifeline." Trevor stared in disbelief. "You never told me." "Because it wasn't your problem," Richard snapped, defensive again. "But now, with Jordan blocking us at every turn, I'm 3 months from insolvency." Trevor sank into a chair, processing the revelation. "That explains your obsession with higher profit margins." "We need to change tactics," Richard said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Find out everything there is to know about Marcus Jordan. Everyone has pressure points. Family problems, financial troubles, past mistakes. Something we can use." "You're talking about blackmail," Trevor said quietly. Richard's eyes hardened. "I'm talking about survival." Meanwhile, as the developers plotted their counterattack, Marcus was building his own coalition. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," Marcus said, as he and Councilwoman Jefferson settled at a corner table in a small cafe near City Hall. "When the director of city planning asks for an urgent lunch, I make time," Jefferson replied, studying him. "What's happening with Whitman Pierce? I heard they've been making calls to council members." Marcus nodded. "The deputy mayor called this morning. Apparently the review process is taking too long for their comfort." "Political pressure," Jefferson nodded knowingly. "That's their standard play." "There's more," Marcus said, lowering his voice. "We've found significant discrepancies in their financial disclosures. The affordable housing they promised? Their internal documents suggest they have no intention of building it." Jefferson's eyes flashed with anger. "I knew they were lying through their teeth. That entire presentation was a smokescreen. I need allies, Diana. This isn't just about following procedure anymore." Something in his tone made Jefferson look at him more closely. "This is personal for you, isn't it?" Marcus was silent for a moment, weighing how much to share. "I grew up in Oak Park." Recognition dawned on Jefferson's face. "The neighborhood that was demolished for the Eastridge Mall development. 20 years ago," Marcus nodded. "Hundreds of families displaced with promises of relocation assistance that never materialized. My parents lost everything. The home they'd spent 30 years paying for, the community they'd helped build." "I didn't know," Jefferson said softly. "I was in college when it happened, watching my parents lose their dignity, forced to move in with relatives." His voice trailed off. "That's why I went into urban planning. And why I can't let this happen again." Jefferson reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "You've got my full support. What's your plan?" "Two approaches," Marcus explained, his focus returning. "First, I've contacted Horizon Development Group. They specialize in community-integrated projects. They're interested in presenting an alternative proposal for the site." "Smart," Jefferson nodded. showing there are development options that don't destroy the community. Second, I need you to organize neighborhood associations for the next public hearing. When residents understand what's really planned for their community, they'll become their own best advocates. Jefferson smiled. Consider it done. Those developers picked the wrong neighborhood and the wrong director of planning to try and steamroll. As they continued strategizing, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just bureaucratic procedure anymore. It was about justice for a community that deserved better than to be seen as an obstacle to profit. Marcus stepped out of the city planning department to find a young woman with a press badge waiting near his car. Director Jordan? Emma Chen, City Tribune. Could I get a comment on the West Side development delays? Marcus paused, immediately cautious. I wasn't aware the Tribune was covering zoning matters. We weren't, she replied, until we received an interesting press release about obstructionist bureaucracy, strangling economic investment in underprivileged communities. Care to respond? Thorough review isn't obstruction, Ms. Chen. It's good governance. Whitman claims your department has requested 17 separate studies in 2 months. Is that standard procedure? Marcus maintained his professional composure. For a project of this size impacting an established neighborhood? Yes. Each study addresses legitimate concerns about environmental impact, infrastructure capacity, or community needs. They're holding a press conference tomorrow claiming your personal bias is delaying urban renewal. The public record will show every request is consistent with regulatory requirements, Marcus replied. If you're doing a story, I'd suggest looking into the discrepancies between what Whitman Pierce is promising the community versus what they're telling their investors. Emma's eyebrows rose. That sounds like an accusation. It's a suggestion for thorough reporting, Marcus countered, checking his watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting. As the reporter walked away, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Whitman and Pierce are in the lobby, demanding to see you. He sighed, turning back toward the building. This confrontation was inevitable, but he hadn't expected it today. The tension in Marcus's office was palpable as Richard Whitman stood, hands pressed against the desk, leaning forward aggressively. Trevor Pierce remained near the door, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. This is targeted harassment, Richard snarled. 17 studies? Shadow impact on playground equipment? Migratory bird pattern analyses? You're deliberately sabotaging our project. Marcus remained seated, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Richard's fury. Every requirement follows established protocols for developments in historically significant neighborhoods. Historically significant? Richard scoffed. It's 4 blocks of rundown housing and a community center that's falling apart. That rundown housing has been home to 3 generations of families, Marcus replied evenly. The center hosts after-school programs for 200 children. Just because you don't value something doesn't diminish its significance to others. Richard straightened, adjusting his tie as he visibly tried to regain control. Look, we got off on the wrong foot. I said some things that morning that were unfortunate. But this is business, not personal. I agree completely, Marcus nodded. Which is why every request has been documented, justified, and applied consistently with city regulations. Our investors are getting nervous, Trevor interjected from across the room. The delays are costing us hundreds of thousands. Perhaps you shouldn't have promised them an unrealistic timeline, Marcus suggested. Richard's eyes narrowed. We have friends in the mayor's office, on the city council. I'm aware, Marcus acknowledged. This project is happening, Richard continued, his voice lowering to a threatening tone. One way or another. You're just making it difficult for everyone, especially the community you claim to care about. Progress is inevitable. Progress isn't displacement, Marcus countered, and it isn't erasing cultural heritage for profit. Richard laughed coldly. Cultural heritage? Please. You're blocking economic opportunity because you think we disrespected you. These people need jobs, not more decay, while you nurse your wounded pride. These people? Marcus repeated, the only hint of his anger a slight tightening around his eyes. You know what I mean, Richard said dismissively. I believe I do, Marcus replied, and I think we're done here. We're just getting started, Richard retorted, moving toward the door. Your kind always makes things harder than they need to be, always looking for slights instead of opportunities. Trevor winced at the comment, avoiding eye contact with Marcus. The community deserves better than what you're offering, Marcus said calmly. And they have more advocates than you realize. Richard paused at the door. You should be careful, Jordan. Making enemies of people like me can have career implications. Is that a threat, Mr. Whitman? A reality check, Richard replied with a cold smile. There will be developments long after you're gone, but there are other planning directors if you can't handle the job objectively. After they left, Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself. The confrontation had revealed something important. Richard was feeling the pressure and lashing out. His thinly veiled racism confirmed everything Marcus had suspected about the man's character and intentions for the neighborhood. His intercom buzzed. Director Jordan, there's a community group from West Side in the conference room. They're asking about the development project. Marcus hadn't scheduled this meeting. It seemed the ripple effects of his actions were spreading further than he'd anticipated. The conference room was packed with concerned citizens, elderly residents, young parents with children, small business owners. Their faces showed a mixture of worry and determination. Director Jordan, Mrs. Rivera called out, the same woman who had greeted him that fateful morning at the park. We've been hearing rumors about luxury condos replacing our homes. When were you going to tell us? Demanded an elderly man with a cane. We're supposed to have notice before they tear down our neighborhood. Please, everyone. Marcus raised his hands. No demolition permits have been issued or even requested yet. The project is still under review. The Tribune says it's a done deal, a younger woman countered. That it'll bring jobs and better housing. Nothing is decided, Marcus assured them. In fact, there are serious concerns about the developer's plans and promises. They offered my restaurant $20,000 to terminate my lease early. A middle-aged man spoke up. Said if I didn't take it, I'd get nothing when eminent domain kicks in. Marcus frowned. They have no authority to invoke eminent domain, and no such action is being considered. The gathering had grown beyond what Marcus could address alone. These people needed organized information and advocacy. As if reading his thoughts, Councilwoman Jefferson slipped into the room. I see you've met my constituents, she said quietly to Marcus before addressing the crowd. Folks, I know you're concerned. That's why I'm organizing a neighborhood action committee. Director Jordan has been rigorously reviewing this development to protect your interests, but we need to stand together. As Jefferson took control of the meeting, Marcus realized the situation had evolved beyond a conflict between himself and two prejudiced developers. An entire community had mobilized, and he was now at the center of a much larger battle than he'd intended. Close the door, Marcus. Eleanor Matthews, Commissioner of Urban Development and Marcus's direct supervisor for the past 8 years, didn't look up from the stack of newspapers spread across her desk. Each featured headlines about the West Side development battle. Marcus sat across from her, maintaining a composed exterior despite his unease. Eleanor had always supported his methodical approach to planning. Her summons this morning felt different. The mayor called me, she said finally, meeting his gaze. Twice yesterday. Once at home during dinner. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? She leaned back, studying him. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're deliberately creating a situation that's putting political pressure on this entire department. I'm following established protocols. Don't, Eleanor interrupted, holding up her hand. Not with me. We've worked together too long. Yes, everything you've requested is technically within guidelines. But 17 separate studies? Community impact assessments with 3 rounds of revisions? You're applying every possible regulation to this one project. Marcus remained silent. The Tribune is running a series on bureaucratic roadblocks to urban renewal, featuring you as Exhibit A. She pushed a newspaper toward him. The mayor's worried about development funds drying up citywide. The developers misrepresented their intentions, Marcus replied. Their financial disclosures don't align with their investor documents. They never plan to fulfill the affordable housing commitments. Then reject their proposal on those grounds, Eleanor countered. But this death by 1,000 paper cuts approach feels personal. She hesitated. I heard about what happened that morning. About what they said to you. Marcus felt a flash of indignation. This isn't about that. Isn't it? Even a little? She pressed. Because I'd understand if it was. What they did was inexcusable. You think I'm being vindictive? I think you're human, Eleanor said gently. And I'm worried you're risking your professional reputation on a vendetta that won't actually help the community you're trying to protect. Marcus stood and walked to the window. From this height, he could see the West Side neighborhood in the distance. When I was 10, he said quietly, my father was pulled over driving through Hillcrest Heights. The officer made him get out of the car, put his hands on the hood, asked what he was doing in that neighborhood. My father was the assistant principal at the high school there. He turned back to Eleanor. I remember thinking, even then, how power can be wielded so carelessly by those who have it against those who don't. Whitman and Pierce see that community as an obstacle to profit, not as people with lives and histories. They made that abundantly clear. So it is personal, Eleanor concluded. It became personal the moment they revealed their true intentions for that neighborhood, Marcus acknowledged. But my actions are professional. Everything in those requests is necessary to properly evaluate their proposal. Eleanor sighed. The mayor wants this resolved. If there are legitimate reasons to deny this development, compile them formally. But the current approach is becoming untenable politically. I understand, Marcus said, a weight settling in his chest. I'll have a comprehensive assessment ready by next week. As he turned to leave, Eleanor added, Marcus, just be sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Justice and revenge look similar in execution, but lead to very different places. Her words followed him back to his office, where he found himself questioning his own motives for the first time since this began. Across town, in the Whitman Pierce conference room, Trevor watched Richard rage at their legal team. I don't care what it costs. Find a way to expedite this process or file an injunction. Something, Richard shouted, his face flushed. We're losing $50,000 a week while Jordan plays his bureaucratic games. The lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances before the senior partner spoke. Mr. Whitman, there's nothing legally actionable here. Every request falls within the city's regulatory framework. Then what am I paying you for? Richard demanded, slamming his hand on the table. We could file a complaint alleging discriminatory treatment, another lawyer suggested hesitantly. Claim the firm is being singled out unfairly. Trevor stiffened. On what grounds? The lawyer avoided his gaze. We could imply Director Jordan has a personal bias against white developers, Trevor interrupted, incredulous. After what Richard said to him? Do you realize how that would look? Like we're desperate and possibly racist, the senior partner confirmed. I wouldn't recommend it. Richard dismissed the legal team with a wave of his hand. When the door closed, he turned on Trevor. Thanks for the support, he sneered. Completely undermining me in front of our attorneys. I'm trying to prevent you from making things worse. Trevor replied. Filing discrimination claims would be catastrophic. We're already facing catastrophe. Meridian's giving us 2 more weeks before they pull funding. I told you what that means for me. Trevor rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of a decision he'd been avoiding. I think we need to consider separating our positions on this. Richard went very still. What does that mean? It means I've been approached by Jordan's team, Trevor admitted. They're interested in my cooperation regarding the financial discrepancies between our public proposals and investor documents. You would betray me? Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. After 20 years? It's not betrayal to tell the truth, Trevor countered. We promised affordable housing units we never budgeted to build. We misrepresented community benefits to secure preliminary approval. That's called business. Everyone does it. Not everyone. And not like this, Trevor insisted. I have a reputation to consider, a future in this industry. Richard's laugh was bitter. While I face financial ruin? Where was this ethical concern when we were planning the development? I should have spoken up earlier, Trevor acknowledged, but I'm speaking now. We need to revise our proposal, make it legitimate, actually include the affordable units, build the community center we promised, and slash our profits to nothing, Richard scoffed. Trevor stood, gathering his resolve. Those are the choices, Richard. Revise the proposal honestly, or I distance myself from this project before it takes me down too. As he walked toward the door, Richard called after him, You walk away from me on this, and I'll make sure you never work in development again. Trevor paused, hand on the doorknob. Better unemployed than indicted for fraud. He left without looking back, his heart pounding with both fear and strange relief. He had made his choice. Now he needed to decide how far he was willing to go with what he knew. Marcus stared at the email on his screen, reading it a third time to ensure he understood correctly. Trevor Pierce had reached out privately, offering documentation of the Whitman-Pierce financial irregularities in exchange for immunity from potential consequences. How legitimate does this seem? He asked Sophia, who leaned against his desk reviewing the attached files. Very, she replied, scrolling through spreadsheets. These are internal financial projections showing zero allocation for the promised affordable housing in years 2 through 5. And look, she pointed to a highlighted section. Their investor prospectus explicitly states the community benefits are contingent on additional tax incentives they haven't even applied for. Could be altered documents, Marcus cautioned. Pierce might be covering himself. Possibly. But these match the discrepancies we already found, Sophia noted. And there's something else. She clicked open an audio file. He sent this recording from their investor presentation last month. Richard Whitman's voice filled the office. Phase 1 appears to include affordable units and community spaces on the plans shown to the city. But our actual construction schedule postpones those elements indefinitely. Classified as aspirational development pending additional subsidies. This approach maximizes return while maintaining the appearance of community investment. Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his chest. They're explicitly stating their intention to mislead the city. It gets worse, Sophia continued. Pierce included contact information for James Wilson at Meridian Investment Group, suggesting we share these findings directly with their primary financier. Marcus considered the implications. That's a significant escalation. But potentially effective, Sophia countered. Financial backers don't appreciate being associated with fraudulent projects. The reputational risk alone could be enough for them to pull out. Marcus weighed his options. Eleanor had urged him to compile legitimate reasons for denying the project. This was certainly legitimate, but taking it directly to the investors would destroy Whitman-Pierce before the official review was complete. Was this justice or revenge? The memory of Richard Whitman's sneering face as he'd threatened Marcus's career, provided the answer. Set up a call with James Wilson, Marcus decided. These investors deserve to know exactly what they're financing. James Wilson's office at Meridian Investment Group exuded old money. Wood-paneled walls, leather furniture, and golf trophies displayed tastefully in glass cases. The man himself matched his surroundings. Silver-haired, Brooks Brothers suit. Harvard class ring prominently displayed. "I appreciate your candor, Director Jordan," Wilson said, reviewing the documents spread across his desk. "Though I'm disturbed by the implications. We conduct thorough due diligence before committing capital." Whitman Pierce presented different projections to different stakeholders, Marcus explained. The city received one version, while investors like yourself received another. Wilson's expression darkened as he listened to the audio recording. "This is highly problematic. Meridian has a 50-year reputation for ethical investment. We cannot be associated with deceptive practices regardless of potential returns. I assumed you'd want this information before committing further resources," Marcus said. "Indeed." Wilson pressed his intercom. "Janet, please schedule an emergency meeting with the investment committee for this afternoon." He turned back to Marcus. "I expect we'll be reevaluating our position immediately." As Marcus left the Meridian offices, he felt conflicted. He'd taken a major step toward stopping the predatory development, yet the personal satisfaction he felt was undeniable. Eleanor's warning echoed in his mind. Justice and revenge might look similar in execution, but they led to different places. His phone rang just as he reached his car. The caller ID displayed Whitman Pierce. Richard Whitman's world was collapsing around him. The call from Meridian had been brief and devastating. Funding suspended pending investigation into potential misrepresentations. His hands shook as he poured another scotch, spilling drops on the financial documents scattered across his desk. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Whitman, there are 2 people here from the city ethics office. They're asking about the West Side development." This couldn't be happening. Not now. "Tell them I'm unavailable," he barked. "In meetings all day. They say it's urgent. Something about financial disclosures." Richard slammed the intercom off and grabbed his phone, scrolling to the recently added contact. Marcus Jordan's private number, obtained through a city council connection just yesterday. He jabbed the call button, pacing as it rang. Marcus answered on the 3rd ring. "Director Jordan speaking." "You son of a bitch," Richard hissed. "What did you say to Meridian?" A brief pause. "Mr. Whitman, I simply shared information they should have been aware of." "You had no right," Richard shouted. "You've deliberately sabotaged this project from day one because of your personal vendetta." "The investors deserve to know what they were financing," Marcus replied, his voice maddeningly calm. "Just as the community deserves to know what was planned for their neighborhood. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard's voice cracked with desperation. "This project was my financial lifeline. Perhaps you should have considered that before attempting to exploit an entire community," Marcus suggested. "This is because I didn't recognize you that day, isn't it?" Richard sneered, alcohol and panic loosening his tongue. "Your kind always overreact. So sensitive, so quick to cry racism when things don't go your way." The line went silent for a moment before Marcus spoke again, his voice cold. "Thank you for confirming my assessment of your character, Mr. Whitman. I suggest you focus on the ethics office investigators in your lobby. I believe they have some questions about your financial disclosures." The line went dead as Richard stared in shock. How did Jordan know about the ethics office? The answer hit him like a physical blow. Trevor. His partner had betrayed him, provided evidence, coordinated this assault from multiple directions. As if summoned by his thoughts, Trevor appeared in his doorway, face grim. "The ethics office is here," he said quietly. "They have questions about our investor documents, versus our city submissions. You did this, Richard accused, voice shaking. You stabbed me in the back. I tried to warn you, Trevor replied. I gave you the chance to revise the proposal honestly. So you went running to Jordan to save yourself? I went to the ethics office, Trevor corrected. Jordan reached out to Meridian independently. Richard laughed bitterly. Perfect coordination. The complete destruction of everything I've built. You destroyed it yourself, Richard, Trevor said sadly. With your arrogance, your prejudice, your belief that rules don't apply to you. A security officer appeared behind Trevor. Mr. Whitman, the investigators need to speak with you now. They have a warrant to access company financial records. Richard sank into his chair, the full weight of his situation crashing down on him. This isn't over, he promised, glaring at Trevor. I'll make sure everyone knows you were complicit all along. I'm prepared for that, Trevor said simply. Are you prepared for what comes next? The community center buzzed with energy as residents filled every available seat. Handmade signs leaned against walls. Save our homes. Community not commodity. West Side strong. At the front of the room, Councilwoman Jefferson stood beside Marcus, watching the crowd grow. I expected 30 people, she whispered. There must be 200 here. Marcus nodded, genuinely moved by the turnout. Word spreads fast. Especially when people learn developers plan to demolish their homes, Jefferson replied. The Tribune finally ran a piece on the financial discrepancies you uncovered. Changed the whole narrative. Marcus scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from neighborhood streets, local businesses, and community events. Elderly residents who'd lived here for decades sat alongside young families and small business owners. This wasn't just a collection of individuals, it was an ecosystem of human connections. Jefferson stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for coming tonight. As your council representative, I want to be clear. No final decisions have been made about the Whitman-Pierce development. But thanks to Director Jordan's thorough review process, we've uncovered serious concerns about their intentions for our neighborhood. A murmur spread through the crowd as Marcus stepped forward. Many of you have asked what happens next, he began. The planning department will present a comprehensive assessment at next week's public hearing. I encourage everyone to attend and make your voices heard. Mrs. Rivera stood up. We heard they promised affordable housing they never planned to build. Is that true? The evidence suggests their commitments to the city didn't match their actual financial plans, Marcus confirmed, careful to remain professional despite his personal feelings. So they lied, an elderly man called out. They were going to push us out with nowhere to go. The room erupted in angry voices until Jefferson raised her hands for quiet. This is exactly why we needed everyone here tonight, she said. We're organizing transportation to the hearing. We need the board to see our community united. A young woman stood up. My grandmother's lived in her apartment for 40 years. Would she really have been evicted? According to their investor documents, yes, Marcus replied honestly. Their plan projected complete tenant turnover within 2 years. The room filled with outraged exclamations and personal stories shouted from different corners. Marcus watched as neighbors comforted one another, shared information, and formed smaller groups to coordinate their response. What had begun as his individual stand against two prejudiced developers had transformed into a community defending itself. After an hour of questions and planning, people began to disperse. An elderly man with a worn fedora approached Marcus. You remind me of your father, he said, extending his hand. I'm Walter Reed. I taught with him at East Ridge High before they tore down our neighborhood for that mall. Marcus shook his hand, surprised. You knew my father? Walter nodded. He was the same way. Quiet strength, unwavering dignity. When the developers came for our community, he organized just like this. always said, "The system can work for us if we understand it better than those who built it to exclude us." The words hit Marcus with unexpected emotional force. "I didn't know that." "He'd be proud of you," Walter said. "Fighting the same fight, but from inside the system this time. That's progress." He tapped his cane for emphasis before moving toward the exit. As the room emptied, Jefferson rejoined Marcus. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I have," Marcus admitted. "My father fought the Eastridge Mall development the same way we're fighting this one. I never made the connection until now. The difference is, he was on the outside looking in," Jefferson observed. "You're on the inside, with the power to actually stop it." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why this feels so important. It's not just about Whitman and Pierce and their comments that day. It's about finishing something my father started." Across town, in the now quiet offices of Whitman Pierce Development, Trevor methodically packed his personal items into a cardboard box. Awards, photographs, mementos from 20 years of partnership, all now tainted by the unraveling scandal. The ethics office investigation had expanded dramatically after their initial visit. Computers had been confiscated, files seized, staff interviewed. The company that had taken 2 decades to build was collapsing in days. His phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. "Immunity agreement approved. Ethics committee meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. A mixture of relief and shame washed over him. He was saving himself at Richard's expense, though Richard had certainly earned his fate. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Eleanor Matthews, the Urban Development Commissioner, stood in his doorway. "Mr. Pierce, do you have a moment?" Trevor gestured to a chair. "Commissioner Matthews, I didn't expect a personal visit." "These are unusual circumstances," she replied, studying him. "I wanted to understand something. You were partners with Richard Whitman for 20 years. Why turn on him now?" Trevor considered the question carefully. "I told myself our business practices were industry standard. Maybe they started that way, pushing regulatory boundaries, maximizing profits. But this project crossed a line I didn't even realize existed until recently." "Until Director Jordan pushed back," Eleanor observed. "Yes," Trevor admitted. "His persistence forced me to actually see what we were doing, the real human cost of our business model. Richard saw only obstacles to profit. I finally saw people." Eleanor nodded. "And the recording from that first morning, with the comments about the neighborhood?" Trevor looked away, ashamed. "I reported that to the ethics office, too. There's no excuse for it." "No, there isn't," Eleanor agreed, standing to leave. "The hearing is next week. I expect it will be quite different from what you initially anticipated." "I don't think Richard understands what's coming," Trevor said quietly. "Few people do," Eleanor replied, "when they've spent a lifetime believing the rules don't apply to them." The hearing room was designed to accommodate 50 people. Today, over 300 packed the space, spilling into the hallway and lobby beyond. Television cameras lined the back wall, reporters scribbling notes as community members filed in wearing matching West Side Strong t-shirts. Marcus reviewed his presentation one final time, ensuring every finding was meticulously documented and sourced. Each regulatory violation, financial discrepancy, and misrepresentation would be presented without emotion or personal commentary. The facts would speak for themselves. "Impressive turnout," Sophia commented, sliding into the seat beside him. "The Tribune's running a live blog. They're calling it David versus Goliath, Community Fights Predatory Development." "Let's hope David wins again," Marcus replied, watching Eleanor Matthews enter and take her place as chair of the hearing committee. A stir at the entrance drew his attention. Richard Whitman had arrived, alone, without Trevor or his usual entourage of lawyers and assistants. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated. His suit looked slept in, his eyes bloodshot. He clutched a leather portfolio like a shield as he navigated the hostile crowd. "No legal team?" Sophia whispered. "They probably advised him to withdraw the proposal entirely," Marcus observed. "He's too proud." Eleanor called the room to order, her voice firm and professional. "Today's hearing addresses the Whitman-Pierce development proposal for the West Side neighborhood. The planning department has completed its comprehensive review, which Director Jordan will present. Following his assessment, the developer may respond, after which we'll hear public comments." Marcus approached the podium, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes upon him. The responsibility weighed heavily. These people were counting on him to articulate what their neighborhood meant beyond dollars and square footage. The planning department's assessment is based on 3 primary areas of concern, he began, his voice steady. First, regulatory compliance issues, including inadequate infrastructure planning and environmental impact mitigation. Second, financial discrepancies between commitments made to the city versus statements to investors. Third, failure to meet updated affordable housing requirements established by Council Resolution 47B. For 20 minutes, Marcus methodically outlined each violation, discrepancy, and misrepresentation, illustrated with slides comparing Whitman-Pierce's public promises against their internal documents. He concluded by displaying the regulatory standards that had not been met. Based on these findings, the Planning Department recommends rejection of the current proposal as submitted, Marcus finished. The developer would need to address 47 separate regulatory issues before resubmission could be considered. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Eleanor thanked him. "Mr. Whitman, you may now respond to the department's assessment." Richard approached the podium, visibly shaken but struggling to maintain his composure. "Madam Chair, distinguished committee members, I acknowledge there have been irregularities in our proposal process." The admission seemed to physically pain him. "However, I believe we're overlooking the fundamental benefits this development would bring to a struggling area. Yes, there would be displacement. Change always creates disruption. But progress requires sacrifice." Someone in the audience shouted, "Your sacrifice or ours?" drawing scattered laughter and applause. Richard continued, his desperation increasingly evident. "Our company has developed 12 similar projects across 3 states. In each case, property values increased, crime decreased, and economic opportunities expanded." "For who?" another voice called out. "Order, please," Eleanor warned, though her expression suggested she shared the sentiment. "The financing issues raised by Director Jordan reflect standard industry practices," Richard insisted, his voice rising defensively. "Every developer phases community benefits according to profitability metrics. We're being singled out because of a personal grudge." The accusation hung in the air as Richard pointed at Marcus. "Director Jordan has pursued a vendetta against our company since a minor misunderstanding months ago. This entire process has been prejudiced from the start." Eleanor's gavel came down sharply. "Mr. Whitman, restrict your comments to the regulatory findings." "The findings themselves are prejudiced," Richard shot back, composure crumbling. "We're trying to improve this neighborhood, but apparently that's only acceptable if it happens on their terms." "Whose terms, Mr. Whitman?" Eleanor asked pointedly. Richard gestured vaguely toward the community members. "These people don't understand the economics of urban development. They're opposing their own self-interest because some bureaucrat has convinced them our project is a threat rather than an opportunity." The room erupted in outrage as people rose to their feet. "We understand exactly what you're doing," Mrs. Rivera shouted. "You were going to destroy our homes," added another resident. Eleanor restored order with repeated gavel strikes. "Mr. Whitman, do you have any specific responses to the regulatory violations identified in the assessment?" Richard's shoulders sagged as reality set in. We would need time to address these concerns. I request a 90-day extension to revise our proposal. After you just admitted you never intended to fulfill your commitments? Asked a committee member. I didn't say that, Richard backpedaled. Actually, you did, Eleanor noted. You stated that phasing out community benefits based on profitability metrics is your standard practice, which directly contradicts the contractual commitments in your proposal. Richard looked around desperately, finding no allies in the room. This is a railroad job. You've already decided against us. On the contrary, Marcus interjected calmly, we're deciding based on the proposal you submitted, evaluated against established regulatory standards that apply to all developers equally. Public comments will now be heard, Eleanor announced. Each speaker has 2 minutes. For the next hour, resident after resident approached the microphone. Small business owners described generations of community service. Parents spoke of children who relied on the community center. Elderly residents explained how their apartments held decades of memories. Richard sat alone, shrinking further into himself with each testimony. The confident, arrogant man who had demanded coffee that morning months ago was gone, replaced by someone confronting the human consequences of his actions for the first time. When the public comments concluded, Eleanor addressed the committee. Having heard the assessment and responses, I call for a vote on the Whitman-Pierce development proposal as submitted. The rejection was unanimous. The euphoria of victory faded quickly the next morning as Eleanor stepped into Marcus's office, her expression telegraphing trouble ahead. He's filed a formal complaint with the Civil Service Commission, Eleanor explained, closing Marcus's office door behind her. Alleging racial bias against white developers, abuse of regulatory authority, and targeted harassment. Marcus set down his coffee cup, the triumph of yesterday's unanimous rejection suddenly tasting bitter. I expected something like this. Not just a complaint, Eleanor continued, her expression grave. Whitman's hired Caldwell and Ross, the litigation firm that specializes in suing municipal governments. He's threatening a $20 million lawsuit against the city, with you named personally. On what grounds? He claims you orchestrated a systematic campaign of regulatory sabotage, motivated by racial animus after their minor social faux pas that morning. Eleanor rubbed her temples. His statement suggests you deliberately targeted a white-owned business to benefit people of your own background. Marcus felt a surge of anger he rarely allowed himself to experience. That's absurd. It's desperate, Eleanor agreed. But desperation makes people dangerous. The mayor's office is concerned about potential settlement costs. They're considering settling? Marcus asked incredulously. After everything we uncovered about their fraudulent practices? The ethics office investigation isn't complete yet. Meanwhile, the mayor doesn't want a prolonged legal battle during an election year. She handed him a folder. The city attorney prepared this summary of options. The mayor would like your response by tomorrow. Marcus opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. They want me to issue a revised assessment? Suggesting the project could proceed with minor modifications? The mayor's suggesting we find a middle path. Reject this specific proposal while opening the door for a substantially revised version. That's not a middle path, Marcus replied, closing the folder firmly. That's capitulation disguised as compromise. Whitman would get exactly what he wants, a foothold in the neighborhood that he could gradually expand while abandoning any community commitments. Eleanor lowered her voice. The mayor called me directly, Marcus. Senator Phillips is involved. Marcus understood immediately. Phillips was Whitman's most powerful connection, a senior senator with significant influence over federal funding for municipal projects. So the real message is, back off or risk citywide funding. The real message is political, Eleanor sighed. The mayor wants this resolved quickly and quietly. Senator Phillips apparently suggested your career advancement might be affected by your handling of this situation. That sounds like a threat. It was delivered as friendly advice, Eleanor replied with obvious distaste. Apparently, your name has been mentioned for the regional urban development position. Marcus leaned back, understanding the implications fully now. The prestigious regional role had been his career goal for years, overseeing planning for 5 cities, with significantly more influence and resources. So my options are to compromise my principles or sacrifice my career advancement. I'm sorry it's come to this, Eleanor said sincerely. For what it's worth, I think what you've done for the West Side community is exactly what public service should be. But I wanted you to understand the forces aligning against you. After Eleanor left, Marcus found himself staring at the commendation on his wall, the one he'd received for revitalizing the riverfront district without displacing existing residents. He'd been so proud of that achievement, of proving that development could serve communities rather than erase them. His phone buzzed with a text from Councilwoman Jefferson. Emergency meeting at the community center. Whitman's people are approaching residents with buyout offers. Claiming project approval is inevitable. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Whitman had replaced desperation with calculated ruthlessness. The conference room of his downtown hotel suite was now his makeshift command center, with 3 phones and a laptop arranged before him. The mayor's office is receptive, his political consultant reported. They're pressing Jordan to soften his position. And the residents? Richard asked. We've made offers to key property owners, another associate confirmed, suggesting that fighting is futile, but generous terms are available now. What about the lawsuit? Filed this morning, his new attorney replied. We've requested an emergency injunction against the planning department's decision. The press release goes out in an hour. Richard allowed himself a thin smile. He might have lost the battle at the hearing, but he'd been fighting development wars for decades. This setback was merely tactical. The hotel room phone rang, and Richard answered immediately. Senator Phillips, thank you for returning my call. This is becoming problematic, Richard, the senator's gravelly voice replied without preamble. I've made calls to the mayor as requested. But there's significant media attention now. Your comments at the hearing didn't help. A momentary lapse, Richard assured him. Stress and frustration. The important thing is getting this project back on track. Your support is invaluable. My support depends on this resolving favorably, the senator warned. The optics are concerning. If this becomes a racial controversy, I may need to distance myself. I understand completely, Richard replied smoothly. But I assure you, once Jordan backs down and we secure preliminary approval, everything else falls into place. The lawsuit is simply leverage. After ending the call, Richard turned to his team. Increase the pressure. I want community leaders receiving calls from every political and business connection they have. Make it clear that this development is happening with or without their cooperation. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Ethics investigation expands. Whitman Pierce financial irregularities found in multiple projects. Richard's facade of control cracked slightly. Who leaked this? Pierce? The ethics office issued a statement, his assistant reported, scanning her tablet. They've expanded their investigation to 3 previous Whitman Pierce developments based on patterns of financial misrepresentation. For a moment, Richard felt the walls closing in. Then he straightened his tie, composure returning. It doesn't matter. We're too far along for them to stop us. By the time any investigation concludes, we'll have broken ground. And if Jordan doesn't back down? Someone asked. Richard's expression hardened. Then his promising career hits an unexpected dead end, courtesy of Senator Phillips. One way or another, Marcus Jordan is about to learn a painful lesson about power. The city council chambers had never been this crowded. Every seat was filled, with people standing along walls and spilling into hallways. News cameras lined the back wall, reporters sensing that today's special hearing would deliver the dramatic conclusion to a story that had captivated the city for months. Marcus sat at the presentation table, surrounded by stacks of meticulously organized documents. The mayor's compromise folder lay unopened beside him, a path he had ultimately rejected after a sleepless night of soul-searching. Whatever the personal cost, he would not betray the principles that had guided his career. Eleanor called the session to order, her voice solemn. Today's special hearing addresses two matters: the appeal of Whitman Pierce Development regarding their West Side proposal, and the consideration of an alternative development plan submitted by Horizon Community Partners. Richard Whitman sat alone at the opposite table, his legal team conspicuously absent. His usual confidence had been replaced by a barely contained desperation. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been sleeping as poorly as Marcus. Before presentations begin, Eleanor continued, I must address procedural matters. Senator Phillips has requested to speak on behalf of Whitman Pierce Development. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. The senator's direct involvement represented a significant escalation of political pressure. Eleanor nodded to a distinguished silver-haired man in the front row, who approached the podium with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to wielding influence. Distinguished council members, he began, his voice carrying the polished cadence of countless campaign speeches. I speak today not just as a concerned elected official, but as someone deeply invested in our city's economic future. The Whitman Pierce Development represents a $120 million investment in an area desperately needing revitalization. Marcus watched the council members' faces carefully. Several nodded, clearly aware of the senator's influence over federal funding. While there have been procedural disagreements, the senator continued diplomatically, I urge the council to consider the broader economic implications. My office has prepared an analysis of the potential job creation and tax revenue benefits. He gestured to an aide distributing folders to council members. Furthermore, the senator added, his tone sharpening slightly, I've had concerning reports about the review process itself. When dedicated civil servants allow personal feelings to influence professional judgments, we must question whether the public interest is truly being served. The implied threat to Marcus's career hung in the air as the senator returned to his seat with a satisfied nod toward Richard. Eleanor turned toward Marcus. Director Jordan, your response? Marcus approached the podium, acutely aware of the stakes. His career, his reputation, and an entire community's future converged in this moment. Senator Phillips speaks of economic implications. Marcus began evenly. I agree, we must consider them. All of them. Not just tax revenue and construction jobs, but the economic devastation of displacing 200 families and 27 small businesses. He methodically distributed his own report to council members. This analysis, verified by independent economists, shows the long-term economic damage of Whitman Pierce's actual plans, not their public promises. Marcus activated the presentation screen, displaying side-by-side comparisons. These documents, obtained through the Ethics Office investigation, reveal the developers' true intentions. They never budgeted for the affordable housing units promised to this council. Their investor presentations explicitly state that community benefits were aspirational and contingent on additional subsidies they never intended to pursue. Murmurs spread through the chamber as council members reviewed the evidence. This isn't about procedural disagreements or personal feelings, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. It's about integrity in development. about whether we allow wealthy interests to exploit communities through deliberate misrepresentation. He turned directly toward the senator. The economic implications I'm concerned with are for the people of West Side who would lose their homes, their businesses, and their community, so that developers could maximize returns for investors. Richard rose abruptly. This is absurd. He's cherry-picking internal documents to create a false narrative. Mr. Whitman, Eleanor warned, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Where is your proof of these accusations? Richard demanded, ignoring her. Marcus calmly retrieved another document. This sworn testimony from your former partner, Trevor Pierce, detailing your company's systematic practice of promising community benefits you never intended to deliver. The council chambers erupted as Richard's face contorted with rage. Pierce is a traitor trying to save himself. This entire process has been a vendetta since day one. Order, Eleanor commanded, gaveling repeatedly until silence returned. I have one final piece of evidence, Marcus continued, producing a small digital recorder. With the Ethics Office's permission, I'm sharing this recording from the initial Whitman-Pierce investor presentation. He pressed play, and Richard's voice filled the chamber. The affordable housing component exists on paper to satisfy regulatory requirements. Our actual construction timeline phases these units into the indefinite future, allowing us to maximize square footage for premium buyers. The silence that followed was deafening. Council members exchanged troubled glances as Richard slumped in his chair, the fight visibly draining from him. The planning department recommends permanent rejection of the Whitman-Pierce proposal on grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation, Marcus concluded. And we recommend the council consider the alternative proposal from Horizon Community Partners, which includes enforceable community benefit requirements and tenant protection guarantees. Eleanor thanked Marcus and called for the council vote. One by one, members voted to uphold the rejection and consider the alternative proposal. The senator sat stone-faced, making notes on his phone. The vote is unanimous, Eleanor announced. The Whitman-Pierce proposal is permanently rejected. The chamber erupted in cheers from community members as Marcus gathered his materials, a profound sense of vindication washing over him. As he stepped into the hallway, he found himself face to face with Richard Whitman. For a moment, neither spoke. "You've destroyed my company," Richard finally said, his voice hollow. 20 years of work. Gone. "You destroyed it yourself," Marcus replied calmly, "with arrogance, prejudice, and the belief that rules didn't apply to you." Richard's face twisted with a final surge of defiance. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I do," Marcus responded. "A man who told me to get him coffee because he couldn't imagine I might be in charge. A man who never stopped to consider that underestimating others might be his greatest weakness." He stepped past Richard, then paused and turned back. "By the way, the coffee machine is down the hall to your right. Help yourself." Richard stood frozen as the full magnitude of his defeat crashed down upon him. Not just a rejected project, but a shattered company, a ruined reputation, and a future filled with lawsuits and investigations. All because he'd underestimated the wrong person. 6 months later, Marcus stood at the podium in the renovated West Side Community Center, watching residents file in for the neighborhood planning workshop. Colorful posters lined the walls displaying architectural renderings of the Horizon Community Partners development, a thoughtfully designed mix of renovated existing buildings and new construction that preserved the neighborhood's character while addressing infrastructure needs. "Quite a difference from the last public meeting here," Councilwoman Jefferson commented, joining him at the front of the room. Marcus nodded, remembering the fear and anger that had filled this space during the Whitman-Pierce battle. Today, there was animated discussion and even laughter as neighbors reviewed design options for the expanded community garden. How does it feel being the hero of West Side? Jefferson asked with a smile. I'm not comfortable with that framing, Marcus replied. I just did my job. With your career on the line, she reminded him. Not everyone would have made the same choice. The regional urban development position had indeed gone to someone else, a fact the mayor had communicated with carefully worded regret about timing and political considerations. But Marcus had found unexpected satisfaction in continuing his work at the city level, where he could directly engage with communities like this one. Speaking of choices, Jefferson said, lowering her voice, did you see this morning's business news? She handed him her tablet, displaying the headline, Whitman Pierce bankruptcy filing approved. Investor lawsuits proceed. The financial fallout was inevitable, Marcus observed. Once Meridian pulled funding and the ethics office findings became public, other investors started demanding accountability. I heard Richard Whitman fled to Panama, Jefferson added. Apparently, the SEC investigation into their previous developments uncovered some creative accounting. And Trevor Pierce? Testifying for the prosecution in exchange for immunity. He's also working with a nonprofit on ethical development guidelines. Jefferson shook her head. Redemption comes in strange packages. Their conversation was interrupted as Sophia approached with a young black woman in her early 20s. Director Jordan, this is Amara Rivera, Sophia introduced them. She's the urban planning student I mentioned, looking for an internship. Marcus shook the young woman's hand. Rivera, any relation to Mrs. Rivera from the apartment complex on Maple? My grandmother, Amara confirmed with a smile. She talks about you all the time, how you saved our neighborhood. Your grandmother was part of saving it, Marcus corrected gently. The community organizing made all the difference. That's why I changed my major to urban planning, Amara explained, her enthusiasm evident. Watching how policy decisions directly impact people's lives, it showed me how I could make a difference. Marcus recognized the same passion that had driven him into public service decades ago. We could use your perspective in the department. Why don't you join today's workshop? See community planning in action. As Amara eagerly joined a discussion group, Marcus felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Walter Reed, the former colleague of his father, holding 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this, Walter said, offering a cup. Planning workshops can run long. Thank you, Marcus replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. Walter surveyed the busy room with satisfaction. Your father would be proud, you know. Not just of what you accomplished, but how you did it. What do you mean? He always said dignity was more powerful than anger, Walter explained. That the system could work for us if we understood it better than those who built it to exclude us. He chuckled softly. Sound familiar? Marcus smiled, recognizing his own words to Sophia months ago. He taught me more than I realized. That's how legacy works, Walter nodded. Not always in the things we remember being taught, but in the principles we absorb along the way. The workshop was ready to begin. As Marcus moved toward the front of the room, he passed a wall of photographs documenting the neighborhood's history. Generations of residents who had built lives, businesses, and community here. Among the images was a new addition. A photo from the city council hearing showing community members celebrating the rejection of Whitman Pierce's proposal. Marcus had never sought to be a hero or to exact revenge. He had simply stood firm on principles that mattered. That development should serve communities, not erase them. That arrogance and prejudice shouldn't be rewarded. That systems could be navigated by those they were designed to exclude. As the workshop began, he looked out at the diverse faces of West Side residents actively participating in planning their neighborhood's future. This was the real victory, not just stopping a harmful project, but empowering a community to shape its own destiny. Let's begin by discussing what makes West Side special, Marcus said, opening the session. What are the elements of this neighborhood that matter most to preserve? Hands rose throughout the room, people eager to articulate the value of what Richard Whitman had dismissed as ghetto neighborhoods that fateful morning. Their voices filled the space with stories, hopes, and vision for a future they now had the power to influence. Marcus sipped his coffee and listened. This, the dignity of being heard, of having agency in one's community, was worth every professional sacrifice. And somewhere, he felt certain, his father was nodding in agreement. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.